and using children's books in a leadership capacity. So that's kind of what we're going for this evening, correct?
Yep, to launch discussion, and we need to give a shout out to Jose Duenas and the Area D Council, because this was actually their request to have this particular Zoom tonight. But I think in light of all of the important and relevant discussions that are happening right now about school, these are going to be some easy ways to launch those conversations with our kids.
Well, great. Well, Allison, thank you. And let's go ahead. Allison is one of our panelists this evening, who's going to be sharing some of her beloved children's books. So let's go ahead and launch now into introducing our panelists for the evening. First off, from Area A, she serves on the Area A Council. And refresh my memory, what school are you from, Leah?
I am at Ceres High School.
There we go. Okay, I was going to say Ceres High School. I should have just jumped right out and said it. From Ceres High School, it's Leah Grant. So welcome, Leah.
Hello.
And then from all the way from Las Vegas, Area H, she is one of our, she pops up at all sorts of CADA events, and we love having her. And I know I'm probably going to misspeak on her title, but she is the director of the Nevada Association of Student Councils, correct?
Yes.
Right on. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Sandy Ginger. Sandy, welcome. And then representing Area D, also serving on the Area D Council, and from Arroyo Grande High School, and the better half of Joe and Shannon Hurtado. Ladies and gentlemen, Shannon Hurtado.
Welcome, everyone. Excited about tonight.
Great to have you here, Shannon. And then our fourth and final panelist this evening, you probably recognize her because she is the current CADA president. It's Allison Gadeke. So Allison, welcome this evening.
Hey, Ron, I just wanted to add that Leah Grant also serves as an advisory member on the Castle State Board.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So,
well, Leah,
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for, Leah is a very active member of the CADA organization. So Leah, thank you. And welcome to all of our panelists for being here this evening. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump. We're about to ready to jump right in. If you have a question, go ahead and throw that in the chat. We're going to do our best to, I'll be watching the chat, and then our other panelists will be watching as well. And of course, if you haven't yet had a chance to, you're also welcome to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, where you're from, either your hometown or the school that you teach at, or wherever you hail from, and your favorite children's book. And so I think we're going to go ahead now, and I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share here. So can we now see the screen with the presentation? Perfect. And Allison, I did remember to hit record at the beginning of the presentation, so we're already off on the right foot. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's begin. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Shannon Hurtado.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm excited to share about, I have 10 books in less than 10. Just a quick information about myself. I've been teaching leadership for 20 years, and about 3 years into teaching leadership, I stumbled across a book called The Butter Battle Book by Dr. Seuss, and I was teaching world history at the time, and I went, wow, if I can teach this book in my world history class, the opportunities were endless with the children's books that I could get my hands on. So that's what I've been creating over the last 17 years, is just a litany of opportunities for children's books to be used in my Link Crew and ASB class. So my first book I want to share with you it's called After the Fall. Thank you. This is a book about what happens to Humpty Dumpty after he falls off the wall. And I think it's a great book right now to share with students who are afraid of when they fail, and getting back up, dusting themselves off, and the opportunities that can come from being courageous. At a time that we have students that are looking at a fall, I guess pun intended, that's going to look very, very different. They have to have the courage to try new things, to reach out to the students that we serve. So that is After the Fall by Dan Sadit. My next one is called Little Tree. And if you're familiar with Who Moved My Cheese, it's kind of the same theme. It's about a little tree who comes to the fall and he doesn't want to lose its leaves. And in not wanting to lose its leaves, it misses out on growing a bit. And so season by season, time passes by and the trees all around him are growing, and he's not. And he realizes that he's now shaded and he's missed the opportunity to become what he was meant to be. So this is, again, a great book for our students to recognize that they're going to be uncomfortable in these times, and they're going to be challenged to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. But it's important that they lose their leaves and grow. So that's the next book. That was The Littlest Tree. A Thousand No's. I just found this one last week, and I'm really excited about it. This is a little girl who has a great idea, and she gets a no. She goes to a person, someone says no, and she's not happy about that. So she goes and asks somebody else, and they give her a no. And no after no after no gets pretty heavy when you have a great idea and you want to share your idea with the world, and everyone keeps turning you down. What do you do with that? This book is a book that teaches you that no is sometimes a great thing, because if you really want your idea to blossom, you have to collaborate with other people. You have to allow people to make your idea better. It's kind of idea that it's not no, it's not yet, and it's the way that you want it to be is maybe not the best, but maybe if we work collaboratively, we can make it even better than your original idea. Again, I think it's a great message for our students to be persistent about their ideas and to share with others, but how we can work together to achieve great things. That's A Thousand No's. The Red Lemon is about a farmer who he's really proud of his yellow lemons, and he makes lemon cake and lemon pie and lemon bars and of course lemonade, and it's the talk of the town. And then one day in his orchard he comes across a red lemon, and he doesn't know what to do with it. Never seen a red lemon. What do you do with a red lemon? What does it taste like? I don't even want to know. So he chucks the lemon. And he doesn't know what happens to the lemon. And over time, what happens is his farm dies down and dissipates. And far, far away on this other island, the red lemon has become this amazing fruit. And it's even sweeter than Farmer McPhee's lemons were ever. So what I love about this one is that his perfectionism of what he thought was the best kept him from making something even sweeter. And I think, again, that's a great lesson for our students, is to kind of let go of what they think is perfect and look at the opportunities and make better lemonade out of maybe a red lemon. So that is The Red Lemon. My next book is called The Girl Who Never Makes Mistakes. And this one's about a little girl named Beatrice. And Beatrice, she enters a talent show, and she knows that she's going to rock it because she never makes a mistake until she does. And then once she's made a mistake, it is paralyzing, so that she doesn't want to ever try anything ever again. And that fear of failure, I think a lot of our student leaders can really, really understand what it feels like to be paralyzed into not wanting to do anything, and yet knowing that you just got to embrace sometimes being imperfect. So it's The Girl Who Never Makes Mistakes. Next, please. Thanks. This one's about little Louie, and he's a cute little character who wants to tell a story, and he's so excited about telling a story, but as the story goes along, the pages get messy, and the reader's kind of eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and in a sense we're kind of spilling some peanut butter, and some jelly's falling on the pages, and then our fingers are sticky, and he just is distracted, and he's frustrated, and he's anxious because he envisioned what his story was supposed to be, and it's not going to become what it was meant to be. and he has to understand that that's okay. And again, I think it's a great story for our students who struggle with perfectionism and anxiety, and letting go of that. Thank you. Next. Oh, I love The Bad Seed. Last week I talked about one book called The Good Egg, and this actually was the first one in the series by Jory John. It's called The Bad Seed, and it's about a very bad seed. And the seed is just really, really naughty. He snacks when he's not supposed to. He writes on the walls. He's just a very challenged seed. And all the other seeds see him as being very naughty as well. But what we don't know is his backstory. And what we don't know is that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And he's realized that I have to be a better person, a better seed, so to speak. And I can change. But we also have to allow him to change as well and see the potential in him. So I love that book. It's called The Bad Seed. Purplicious. This is an old time. If you're familiar with Pinkalicious, this is the same character, but it has to do with a little bit of purple, a little splash of color. Pinkalicious obviously loves pink, and in the series, she goes to school and she's painting, and everybody is painting in black because black is the in color, and it impacts her perception of how she sees herself. And she starts to judge herself and to put herself down. And then actually she even puts her little brother down. So it's kind of a story about really recognizing your authenticity and being proud of being the individual you are meant to be. That's Purplicious. Next, Spoon by Amy Krauss Rosenthal. I love this one. Spoon wishes that he was a knife, and he wishes that he was a spork, or even a pair of chopsticks. Anything's cooler than being a spoon. But what he realizes is that that being a spoon, there's a lot of opportunities, and that with a little self-love and a great mom that believes in his potential, that he's just perfect the way he is. And that's Spoon. My next and final one is also by Amy Krauss Rosenthal, and it's called The OK Book. And what I love about this one is that the drawings are really, really creative, because the word okay is like a body, and they take the pictures, and the illustrations show that being okay is being okay. He's an okay juggler. He's an okay tight walker, roper, jumper. He's just really, really good at being okay. And I think our students sometimes in leadership really struggle with being just okay at things. They want to be perfect. They want to be an A+. And it's important that we help them recognize that sometimes you're going to stand out, and that's great. But sometimes just trying something new and enjoying it because it's something new is a great lesson in itself. And those are my books. I guess my couple last final suggestions is when I use my books, I use them in like 10-minute lessons. I read the book, and then it creates dialogue and discussion for my students. That's one of the reasons I use them a lot. I use them once or twice a month in each of my classes, and kids never get bored of them. I have a lot of different ones on growth mindset, on compassion, on a lot of the topics that the other ladies are going to talk about. And they don't underestimate how teenagers won't get a lot out of the messages that are written for 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. So thank you.
All right, well, Shannon, thank you so much. And we are going to go now to our next presenter, all the way from Nevada, straight out of Area H. Please welcome Sandy Ginger. Sandy, welcome.
Thank you. I love using children's books as well, and they're all written with a lesson already built in. So I think it's just a fabulous way to get a message across and get your students into a discussion or to see things from a different way. Let's go ahead and start then, Ron. Right. I saw someone in the comments put this as one of their new favorites. Anti-Racist Baby just came out this month. And if you recognize the author, that's because it's also from Stamped and How to Be Anti-Racist. Had a great webinar today. Some of you might have been on that earlier. And so it's literally, one of them is a board book, and it has 9 easy lessons. And I think a way to use this in your leadership class is to break it up, have your students in groups and have them each take one of those 9 steps and look at maybe how can we do this, how can we take this step into our school, and they could present that, or they could look at other leadership lessons that tie into that and have kind of a quick little 9-step leadership lesson about anti-racism. And then, you know, if you haven't read the other ones, this will be your first step on the road of increasing difficulty of his books. The next one. The Zacks is Dr. Seuss. You gotta love Dr. Seuss. And if you're not familiar with it, a north-going Zacks meets a south-going Zacks, and south Zacks only go south and north Zacks only go north. So when they meet, somebody needs to step aside or they can't continue. And but neither one of them wants to give up. And in this time, with some of the conversations that we're having, I think see in social media of people who are so on one side and not willing to listen to the other side, they came in with their mindset and this is the way they're doing it. And the Zacks, eventually they won't move and an entire city grows over them and around them and the world keeps going, but they're so stuck in their ways that they miss out on it. And I would say, especially in a lot of the political issues that are going on right now, I know on my Facebook page, there's people who are very staunch on one side and they're not budging a bit. So that it's okay to take some cognitive dissonance and expand your mind. The next one I think is also from Dr. Seuss. And I put in the Sneetches, it's an oldie but a goodie, but I was doing a training with some students earlier this year and none of them had heard of the Sneetches. So I say bring it back into your repertoire. And most of you know that there are star belly Sneetches who have bellies with stars, and plain belly Sneetches have none upon theirs. And the star belly Sneetches are living the high life and having Frankfurter roasts on the beach, and the other Sneetches are not allowed to be part of that. And so eventually they have a machine that puts stars on and off their bellies, and in the end they all realize, like, you know, those stars don't really matter, like we can all just be here together and get along. And so I think that that is a really, really wonderful lesson. And I like giving like a little trinket with a book that you read, and so you can get from Oriental Trading like the little star keychains. If you're going to be in school, then you could give those to your kids. So, next. This is one I just found this summer when Phil Boyd read it at one of his Facebook Lives. And I just fell in love with this book. It's a very sweet little book about Taylor, who has a big trauma in her life. And I probably liked it because I was a kid who had a lot of traumas and tantrums in my life. And when things went wrong, Taylor didn't know how to react to it. And all these animals come in and tell her, oh, you should be mad and we should blame people and we should break other things. And they all come in and try to give her advice about how to deal with her emotions and what she's feeling. And finally, the little rabbit comes in and says, and just listens. And that's what Taylor needed, was just to be heard and work through her emotions on her own. And it's a really wonderful book about empathy and giving space to others and giving them the time to deal with their emotions. Next is another rabbit, a bunny, the runaway bunny. And the runaway bunny, the baby bunny keeps running away from his mom and saying, well, if you're going to come at me here, then I'm going to change into this. I'm going to fly away from you. I'm going to be a bird. And the mom always follows him in a way that is supporting his journey and helping him to be the best that we want him to be. And so I think it's a great lesson about meeting people where they are. Like in our ASB and leadership classes, like we need to make sure we're planning events for all kinds of people. When we plan events, we love dances, but not everybody loves dances. And we love assemblies and rallies, but not everybody loves those. So are we seeing what other people on our campus enjoy and like, and make sure that we're finding things to make everybody feel like we see them and we see what their interests are. So we're meeting them where they are, and going back to school. And this time that's going to be something, especially when you're digital, that's going to be something that's going to be really important, is meeting people where they are. So the next one, the dog poop initiative. First of all, who doesn't want to read about poop? Middle school kids will love that. And a dog comes in and poops on the soccer field, and the owner walks away and doesn't clean it up. And then when the soccer players show up, everyone sees it and everyone points to it and complains about it. And then they decide to play soccer around it and let the other people coming know about it and tell the referees. So there's a lot of people pointing to the problem and complaining about the problem. And then finally, somebody takes initiative, and a dad and his son show up and clean up the poop so they can play on the whole field instead of avoiding this spot with the poop. So it asks you, are you the person who's causing the problem? Are you the person who's complaining and pointing out the problem, making it, not helping fix it? Or are you the person who's going to fix it? And the thing I love at the end of the book too, when the boy who has seen his dad take action and clean that up, when he goes to school the next day, he sees there's some trash on the floor and he realizes, oh, I could be the person to pick that up. And so there's another lesson there too about being a good example. So the next one is a parable told, a story based on Leo Tolstoy's 3 Questions. And the main character, I said it's a parable, and there's some animals that help him on this journey where he learns that the most important time is now, and the most important person is the one that you're with, and the most important thing is to do good by that person. And I think in this pandemic age, that's a really good reminder about the people who we're with, and making sure that we're paying attention and taking care of them and being good to them. The next one, the crayon box that talked, is it was actually a late night like PSA before it was a book. And so if you're up late and you can't sleep, you may see it someday. But it's about a box of crayons that don't get along, and a girl buys that box and takes home and makes a beautiful picture, and they all realize, like, oh, we do have an important role, and if we work together, then the picture will be complete. And so a great lesson about diversity and working together. Then my next one is also a crayon story, and the day the crayons quit. And since they quit, they've done all kinds of things now. They're like going on, crayons have Christmas. They have like a whole series of things that crayons are doing. When the crayons quit, they all wrote a letter, a very polite letter, by the way, to the boy who colors with them, complaining about kind of that they've been pigeonholed. And like the red, I'm tired of these fire trucks and Santa Claus. And the pink is like, only girls want to use me, and nobody will use me for anything except for girly things. And so they like to stretch and try some new things. And so he listens to them. So I think that's a good lesson about listen to the people that you work with and what they want and what their talents are and how they want to explore their talents. And then in the end, there's a beautiful picture that's all crazy colors that makes no sense. And because we don't have to keep always doing the same thing. Next, okay, The Important Book is such a small little story, and it's lyrical in the way it's written, but it takes everyday objects and talks about the things that are important about them and how we see them. And I think that there's a couple ways I think you could use this. One is that you could really have your students write an important book, so they could all individually or in a group pick something that's important. And maybe that's something that's not tangible. Like maybe that you pick the leadership characteristics, and you say that, like, so someone has honesty. And the important thing about honesty is that sometimes it's really hard. That honesty is also, and you can go through, and at the end, but the important thing about honesty is sometimes it's really hard. So it can be, it has so many applications of a project. I just love it for that. It could even be about what's important about your school, and you could have what's important about the gym. What's important about the gym is lots of joyous things happen in the gym, and it's used for practice, and it's used for dances, and it's used for rallies. But what's important about the gym is a lot of joy can happen there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity with this simple little book. And then she has another one too now called another important book, I think. And she's the same lady who wrote The Runaway Bunny too. So and that one's about ages and why it's important at different ages in your life, which again could be a great project. Next, I think I'm almost done. So these I'm going to talk about really quickly because I think I had too many and my time's probably up. I love Charlie the Caterpillar. And if you're old like me, Dom DeLuise is exactly the Dom DeLuise you're thinking of. Charlie is a funky little caterpillar, and nobody wants to play with him because all he wants to do is eat grass all day. And he's this roly-poly caterpillar, and he can't find any friends. And then he goes and turns into a beautiful butterfly, and then everybody wants to be his friend. So part of it is he learns the value of real friendship. But my favorite picture is the other one there on the other side, where he goes back and makes a real friend who they can share, that they have commonalities, and he as a mentor shows her future, and he shows her this is where you're going. A great book for back to school for teachers, I think too, because we see those kids and we see their gifts and they don't always see them. So that's a great one. And I think I have one more. Maybe I don't talk about it really fast. Fritz and the Beautiful Horses. Fritz is a very dependable pony. He's sure-footed and kind and gentle and always willing to work. But the town is full of beautiful horses and nobody thinks much of Fritz. And he tries to fit in and change. And then ultimately it's his sure-footedness, the skills that he has, and his willing to work and his kindness that makes him the hero in the end, and he saves the city. And then they realize that his talents, even though he's different, are important too. And I think that's it. And my last slide, I think, is just different ways to work that you might use them. We used to have a reception at the end of the year for all the advisors of all of our clubs, a little appreciation. And we always picked a book as a theme, like Rainbow Fish, and tell them thank you for sharing your scales or something. Semester projects, so everybody can pick a book and then share, and you get all kinds of, or do that weekly, like the lessons, and your kids can bring in the books, and that's how you'll find even more cool books. And it's just a great way to start discussion. So that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, Sandy, thank you so much. And you know what, I forgot to say this for Shannon, but I will say this now for Shannon and for Sandy, if you want to throw some love to them in the chat. We were doing a lot of affirmation last week during CADA leadership camp. So we would love to continue that and continue to build that as part of the culture of all of the CADA Castle Zoom events and web events that we do. All right. Well, Sandy, thank you once again. And now it is my pleasure to welcome our next presenter, Allison Gadeke. Hello, Allison.
Hey, Ron and everybody. I'm going to share some books with you. I find that these are very expensive events because I've already ordered one on Amazon during this conversation, a few when Shannon was talking at camp last week, but I'm just so excited. Most of the books I'm going to share with you today, I have not used with my class yet. So I'm going to share with you what I like about them, but I really started looking into books that will spark discussion on equity, racism, diversity, empathy. And so I have already a little library in my classroom that's full of books, but these are some new ones that I have. And then I want to share one with you that's not on a slide that I use and we used this year, and I'll tell you how we did it. So next slide, Ron. So, oh, there we go. I was going to say, that's weird. It slid over. This one is called I Am Human, and it's a book of empathy, and it's really about self-acceptance and having empathy for not only yourself, but also for others. And it affirms that we can make good choices by being compassionate for ourselves and others. And I just love Peter H. Reynolds, who did the Dot and Ish, also did the artwork for these books, which were written by Susan Verde. And I love this one. It's very, very simple, but it's a great, I think it'll be a great discussion sparker. And then when I was actually researching to put these, looking for the pictures actually on Amazon to pull up these, they said, well, if you like this, then you're gonna like I Am Love, a book about compassion, and you're going to like I Am Peace, a book about mindfulness. And they were absolutely right. So now I own all three. These two actually just came today. So, but they're great little discussion starters, all three of those on those topics. The next one that I have, these are two books by Latasha M. Perry. And they really are about appreciating ourselves for who we are, even if we see ourselves as quote unquote different. And there's a particular emphasis on Black children, which I love. And this is my favorite page out of Skin Like Mine. And it said, it says, my best bud in the whole world, Sean, we're like cookies and cream. When we're together, our skin color doesn't mean a thing because we know it's what's inside that matters the most. Color should never keep two people from being close. And I think, you know, that's a great message for our kids to talk about. And what does that look like? And what does that mean? And how do we treat people? Next slide. Okay, this one's called Chocolate Milk, Por Favor. And it's about celebrating diversity with empathy. There's a boy who's been at school forever, and he's ready to pick on the new kid who is an English language learner. And the friend of the bully points out that the new kid needs help and that perhaps he should help. And the new kid, yeah, no, he just wants to pick on him and sit back and watch. And all of a sudden, the other kids discover that the little boy, the new kid, is very good at sports, and he can do tricks with a soccer ball that nobody else can do. And so they embrace him, and all of a sudden, the bully is on the outside thinking, wait, what happened? How did this kid replace me? And eventually, they become friends because of the compassion of the new kid. So great messages in that one. You'll be able to tell that I am a Peter H. Reynolds fan with this next book, because it's another one. This one's called Say Something. And the message is really that your voice is important, so speak up and be heard. And it talks about all the different ways to express yourself and advocate for what's right, whether that's writing poetry or writing a song or actually speaking up. If you see someone lonely, being there, creating art that expresses it, planting seeds. So I even love this part right here. So we'll probably read through all of these things, little messages in there and talk about it. But at the end, it says, your voice can inspire, heal, and transform. Your voice can change the world. Are you ready to say something? So I think that's a great message for our kids, especially with everything that's going on right now, and people being targeted for one reason or another. The next book that I have, I'm real excited about because the CADA Equity Committee, we actually met with the author, and he spoke with us before we even bought the book and talked to us about the writing of this book and why it was important to him. And he gave a lot of insight into growing up as a child of mixed race and what that was like for him, and how during Black History Month, for example, he felt like there was a lot of pressure on him because he was one of like 3 Black kids in his school. And so he talks about some of those themes in this book. It's a very simple book, but it is, it's really powerful. And it gives the definition of racism in terms kids can understand and discuss, and no pictures at all, yet it's just really powerful in how he's presented it. So that's a kid's book about racism by Jelani Memory. The cool thing about the kid's book about, I was actually introduced to this book by a friend of mine, Layman Hicks, who's one of our speakers. And he suggested that we look at Jelani, but he actually has a book called The Kid's Book About Failure that teaches kids, you know, you don't have to be perfect. And there are a kid's book about, and there's a ton of different topics through this company. And if you write to them and tell them that you're a teacher, there's a process you need to go through, and it's a little slow right now because of COVID, but they will give you 50% off the books. And they just came out with a new one called The Kid's Book About Voting. So I think there's some really powerful titles in there that you could look into. So that's a kid's book about racism. And the company is a kidsbookabout.com. if you're interested. So the next book is about Layla, and Layla has just moved here, and she moved from Abu Dhabi, and she's old enough now to celebrate Ramadan. And so she's going to be doing her first fast. And I guess I never looked at it in terms of this before. It was an eye-opener even for me, even though I know a lot about Ramadan. I've talked about it with my students, but it's a celebration to fast for Muslim children. And so Layla is, her teacher assumes she's forgotten her lunchbox because she doesn't have any lunch that day. And she actually writes her teacher a note and says, hey, you know, this is a really big deal for me. It's the first time that I get to fast. And then her mom also has written something about what a big thing it is in the culture and how, you know, this is kind of symbolizing that she's becoming a woman and that she's, you know, considered more mature in her culture, in her religion. And so, and it shows the compassion of the teacher who then writes back to her and says, I'm so proud of you. You know, this is something that's really important to you, and I will celebrate with you, and you can have spend lunchtime in the library this month. So it's a great book about celebrating different cultures as well as appreciating each other's differences. So that's Layla's Lunchbox. And then I Am Enough by Grace Byers. It just talks about appreciating our uniqueness and all of the qualities that we have, that sometimes we stand out and we think, oh, I don't want to stand out, especially in middle school and high school. I just want to fade into the background. This is my favorite part of the book. And in the end, we are right here to live a life of love, not fear, to help each other when it's tough, to stay together. So, and I just love the diversity that's celebrated in this book as well. Now, one that I did not have a slide for is A is for Activist. T Street suggested this a couple weeks ago. And so it goes into, it kind of tells the story of through the alphabet of what it's like to be an anti-racist and how to educate yourself and how to speak up, how to get justice. It even, on the L page, it says LGBTQ, love who you choose because love is true, liberate your notions of limited emotions, celebrate with pride, our links of devotion. So that's A is for Activist. When I first got it, I was like, wait a minute, this is a little kid's book, but it's actually not. It's a board book, but you could, you know, start talking to kids at a very young age, but also our kids, I think, will have more of a grasp for the conversation aspect. The last book that I want to talk about that I don't have a slide for is Stone Soup. And Stone Soup is by John J. Muth. And a lot of us are using this, so I almost didn't use it, but I love it so much that I decided, oh, I'm going to talk about it because maybe somebody hasn't heard of it yet. And what happens is there's a town where nobody wants to work together. Everybody wants to work separately, and they don't pay attention to their neighbors, and they're just very closed off to anyone else. And so these three monks hear of that story, and they come into the village, and a little girl sees them, and she says, what are you doing? And they said, we're making stone soup. And they have a little teeny pot of water with some stones in it. And she says, well, my mom has a bigger pot than that. So she runs home and gets the pot. And then the next neighbor comes along, and, you know, everybody ends up coming along and asking what's happening and then adding something to the soup. And at the end, they realize that they throw a big party for the village, and everybody comes together, and they realize the value of working together. So the way that I use this with my ASB class is I read it at the beginning of the year, and I have everybody write their name on a stone. These are from the dollar store. And we put them in the soup. You guys see that? So all the stones from last year are still in there because I haven't been able to give them back to them. But then when we had our last class, usually I do this at our banquet, but we didn't have our banquet last year. I will read to them what they added to the soup. So Ivan wrote his name on here, and he added introspective thought to our class. So everybody cheered for him when I read that. Gianna wrote her name on here, and she brought enthusiasm. And so every student in our class has their name on their stone, but they didn't know that I added a little commentary, just the word of what they brought to our ASB. Ron, can you show my last slide? Thank you. So this is how I use children's books. I don't actually read them. My ASB president reads them to the class because we meet together, and my ASB president pretty much takes the lead on the lessons, and then I'll critique 6th period and say, hey, add this in for 7th period, and then she'll read it for the next class as well, because she's in both of my ASB classes as the president. And then we do a leadership activity journal. So the first question they write in their journal, the answer to, is what happened in the story. Second, why do you think the message was for leadership? What do you think the message was for leadership students as it relates to you and our campus? And then we have a discussion at that point, and we talk about the first 2 questions. Then we talk about the last 2 questions before they actually write their answers. And then we talk about how can we use this on campus as a leadership team, and how will you personally use the message from this video and discussion. And then I give them a few minutes to finish writing, because then they've had time to listen to their fellow students and really think, you know, this is really important. And I found that by empowering the president to lead that discussion and leaving myself out of it, sometimes I raise my hand if we're going off on a tangent and add to the discussion, but most of the time it's just our president who's leading the discussion, and the kids, it's very sophisticated. Sometimes they surprise me that they're middle school students when I hear their perspective and their point of view. So that's, those are my ideas.
All right. Well, Allison, thank you so much for sharing. Lots of good stuff there, and also made me think about ways that I can use these books with my own leadership students. So thank you. Okay, so batting cleanup from Ceres High School. I will make sure to give you the proper attribution. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Leah Grant.
So thank you guys so much for having me here. I actually started using children's books when I heard from Allison, and Allison used children's books. And I have taught high school and middle school. And so I thought it was just a really cool thing to try and bring to the classroom something that really breaks down a message so much, so kids don't have to fumble and decode the text of the book, but they are able to understand the message. And it really can kind of bring a lighthearted feel to the conversation, because they know it's not going to be something that is super sophisticated and super intense. And yet the dialogue and the conversations that you can have with your students based on these simple books really can bring great conversation. A lot of these books I also read with my children at home. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so I also share them on my kids' bookshelf, as well as taking them into my classroom. So if you want to start with my first book, Ron, that would be great. This is one of them that I actually came across through my children's Amazon book box, not to plug for them or whatever, but it showed up on my doorstep that Amazon selected, and it's Mix, a Colorful Story. And for my it's about these 3 primary colors that there's 3 different sections of town, and they all live within their own section, and it kind of follows the story of what happens when 2 colors meet and fall in love and have a baby and make a family, and everyone's really caught off guard by this fact that these colors have mixed. But then it goes so far as in town they break down the walls, and the entire city becomes this mixed version of and all of these different colors that come about. And it is great for diversity and just really looking at we can pigeonhole these things, and we can say that, this color belongs in this area of town, or this color belongs in this area of town, or this type of person belongs here, or this type of student belongs in this club, or whatever. But this really opens up that message in a really fun way that you can really share with your students. My next book is Ruby Finds a Worry. And this is really something that can kind of go towards mental health. It really is that this girl, Ruby, is walking along. She finds this thing that's kind of following her, and as she notices it and as different things come up, this worry that is with her gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and she doesn't really know what to do about it until she finds another kid at the park who also has a worry as well, and they start talking about it. And as they start talking about it, the worries get smaller and smaller until they eventually disappear. And so it's a way that you can kind of start the dialogue with your leadership students that there are these things that bother us, and there are these things that we don't know how to handle, and we don't know what to do with it. But if we leave it alone, and if we ignore it, it will get bigger and bigger and bigger, manifest itself. But if we actually take the time to stop and have dialogue with it, it will actually help us, kind of work our way through it, and can make that worry get smaller and smaller and smaller, and even eventually make it go away. The next book on my list is The Dot. Apparently, we are all Peter Reynolds fans. And I love this book. I actually tried to not put this book on my list because I feel like this is one of those books that everyone knows. But then I started thinking in the same way that Allison, you thought about Stone Soup. I started thinking, but what if they don't know about it? And what a big disservice that I feel like it would be, especially in these times where we have to look at what we do or what we've done in the past is not going to be kind of good enough. And so we're going to have to transition. So what it is there's a student who is told to do some artwork, and the students, or the child in the book says, I can't do art. And the teacher says, well, fine, put a dot on it, and does, and then tells them to sign their name for it, to take credit for it, really. And it is the best thing ever. And so really it's looking at, okay, how do we take this simple idea and make it more and more and more complex until we're creating these big things, and in the book, a whole like art installation kind of thing. But it really is about self-expression with do what you can with what you have. And then also, how do we transform what we can do into these great things? And it's a simple book and beautifully illustrated as well. My next book is Tilly and Tank, and I also love this book. It is about, and this one is another one that it started on my kids' bookshelf. And it's about Tilly and Tank. Tilly is the elephant, Tank is the tank. And they see each other from a distance. And Tilly is warm and friendly and wants to go introduce herself to this new elephant that she sees. And even though it's a little bit different looking and kind of she doesn't really understand what's different about it and how it makes really loud noises, but she really wants to go make friends with Tank. And Tank, understanding his background, Tank all of a sudden sees an enemy on the horizon. And every time Tilly comes close, he makes a loud noise. He shoots his cannon to scare her away. And it just really looks at how do we look at our backgrounds and how do we overcome what our backgrounds is, or our preconceived notions of something, and overcome those differences to then become friends, which they end up doing. And Tilly is finally able to give Tank a bouquet of roses, or a bouquet of flowers. And it's just super cute. I love reading that one with my kids as well. My next book on here is Stuck, another one that started on my bookshelf with my kids, by Oliver Jeffers. But really this is about a boy who is flying his kite, and his kite gets stuck in a tree. And so the first thing he does to get the kite out of the tree is he throws his shoe up in the tree, and it doesn't knock his kite down, but his shoe gets stuck. And so the next logical thing is to take his favorite shoe, which is the other one, and throw that up in the tree. And again, that gets stuck. And so now he has to figure out how to get his shoes unstuck. And it becomes that all he's trying to do is get the last thing he threw up in the tree out of it, to the point where he throws his neighbor's car, his house up in the tree, a whale, a ship, the firefighters and the fire truck, the mailman, all of these things. And an ape gets thrown in the tree as well. And eventually he throws something up there, and he goes and gets a saw. And of course, because the saw is going to fix the problem, as he throws the saw up into the tree, his kite falls down. And all of a sudden he was like, oh yeah, this kite, this will be so fun to play with, forgetting completely that this was the original problem, and walks away and goes to bed, and leaves all of the items that were thrown up in the tree in there. And so all of a sudden it's just walking away and not cleaning up the mess that you've left. And I think a lot of times, sometimes with our leadership students, we can get really overwhelmed with things, and we change from what our original vision was, and all of a sudden you've ended up at point C, forgetting what A was, and somehow you end up so far down the line that you have lost sight of your original vision. So this is just really keeping track of the original vision, keeping the end in sight, the end goal in sight. And it's a fun and over-the-top way to look at that. My next book is Rex It. Yeah, these are all on my bookshelf right now, actually. This one is fun. It's a dinosaur who loves to knock down blocks. And there are 3 other characters. There's Gizmo and there's 3 characters. I don't remember who they are, but they all build blocks. And Rex, what he does, he comes in after they've built them, and he destroys whatever they've built, and it just crushes them. And so what the 3 of them do is they decide, we're going to get together and we're going to build something that Rex can't destroy. And of course, Rex, being the dinosaur that he is, comes in and destroys it. And so what they realize is the way to keep Rex from destroying it is to make Rex a part of it. And so then they build the best thing they could have ever built, and Rex really helps them build it. It talks about how they were all so happy, almost all so happy, because Rex didn't get to do what he really wanted to do. And then all 4 of them together wreck it so they can rebuild it. And so it's just a really cute thing about inclusion and making sure, even if we say we're doing something for a specific group, we're going to do, Black History Month because we want to recognize a group. Well, are we really taking into account what those groups want to have happen on our campuses to make them feel recognized? And are we really including those groups that we're trying to include by some of our activities? My next one, we're nearing the end of my list. I think I have 1 or 2 more, is Strictly No Elephants. And Strictly No Elephants is about a boy who wants to go and join a pet club. And when he goes to join the pet club, he takes with him his pet elephant. Unfortunately, they've decided that pet elephants are not allowed, and that's the only thing that's not allowed. And so what the boy does is he ends up forming a pet club that includes anybody who has a pet and anybody who has anything, and really invites anyone who has ever felt left out, or anyone who has ever felt excluded, or anyone who has ever felt discriminated against, and includes them in the pet club this way. And I think this is my last book. My next one is Lovely. And this really is just one at looking at equality and looking at opposites, regardless of the physical differences. And no matter what one looks like, and no matter what someone looks like, on the outside, externally, we are all lovely. And so it's just about inclusion and self-appreciation. And that's my last one.
All right. Well,
Hey,
Leah,
Ron,
hey, thank you so much. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I forgot something. There was a sticky note buried. We were talking about this at camp last week. Sometimes I have my kids read these books throughout the year, and then towards the end of the year, I have them write their own children's book along a certain theme. And this year, we are definitely going to do this. I'm actually going to move it to first semester, since we're probably going to be virtual for all of first semester. And then the best of the best, I'm going to make arrangements with elementary school teachers, and my kids are going to go into those classrooms virtually and read to their younger peers. And I think that will be easier than ever this year, because every book can be done in a Google slide project instead of having to physically make the book. So I forgot to share that idea, and I just wanted to throw that out there because I know that was a collaborative from Shannon and Bonnie and I and everybody. We were all sharing those ideas together. So
well,
yeah,
and Allison,
thanks,
what a great idea, and what a great way, without having to worry about transportation issues or field trip permission slips or anything, to get our kids, our middle school and our high school kids, into the elementary schools to interact with their younger peers. That's awesome. Hey, Jose Duenas, I understand that you were part of the inspiration for this to begin with. Jose, if you are willing to unmute yourself, you had a couple of really insightful questions that you shared with me, and I wonder if you wanted to share one or both of those questions with the panel and get their thoughts.
I'd love to, and so in order for me to get this, I'm going to go back to the question I typed out. So where is it?
So Jose, your first question, you said, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Here's my question. Since the social atmosphere has changed and words and actions can draw fire, what guidelines exist that will assist directors in defending the book's presentation? Because I know in the past, well, personally, when I've actually brought a book in, people question, why is that book important? Why are we presenting this book? What lesson is it? Where's the book coming from? So, and I just say, well, it's on the bestsellers list. It's one of the New York's bestseller list, but I don't know if that's enough in the atmosphere that we're in right now. So that's my question to the four of you. Or yes.
That's a great question, Jose. And the way that I'm going to tackle it is I always put several of my book titles, especially ones that I think could be a little, raise some eyebrows type thing, like a kid's book about racism. Parents may question that. All of those book titles will be in my syllabus for my ASB class. The other thing too is I think a lot of that is handled and diffused by the kids reading the book and the kids hosting the discussion, and me having a minimal part in the discussion. It truly is kid driven. Does anybody else on the panel have a thought on that?
I also think sometimes when I think you start with the less assertive books, because once you've kind of established that you have these topics that you can have these discussions with a less assertive book. I wouldn't start my very first book that I'm ever doing, a kid's book about racism or Anti-Racist Baby. Not because they're not good books, but because the titles would really scare people. If you want to start with a book, I Am Love, like people will not flinch at that. Because just the title of it sounds so much safer. That doesn't mean the conversation is going to be any less weak or it's going to go any less deep. But I think people a lot of times get their hackles up because of the unknown. And so start with something safer and build the trust with people before anything crazier happens, I guess.
Thank you.
And Jose, just to add on to that, and I love the idea. I do that with movies or with movie clips in my social studies class. I put it in the permission slip, and until I heard it from Allison, I never even thought of books. But I think that's great too. Just this morning, I was having a conversation. I shared it. This is the language in our Teachers Association contract, our teacher contract that basically talks about academic freedom. And so if you're a leadership teacher, then you certainly, I think all of these books have leadership lessons. So maybe even look to your contract and see, what kind of academic freedom language you have and protections. But I think first and foremost, just develop those relationships with your parents. And I think that just putting it in the syllabus is like, why didn't I think of that before? That's like, mind-blowingly simple. But I love that idea, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in my syllabus for this coming school year. All right. And then Jose, did you have one other question?
Sorry, yes, I did. I noticed that every single book title, there was a word or words that the book was focusing on. Did that come from the author, or is that something from your readings you chose, or you thought the book what the book would be good for?
I'm just seeing the faces of our presenters, and I think they're saying it came from us.
It came from us.
Yeah. Are you talking about the themes, Jose? Yeah. So for me, sometimes people will perceive a book in a different theme and whatnot, and that was what's great about books. And like Allison said, sometimes when you let the kids take off with a book, they see different themes than I would have ever have imagined. So what I get from a book may be totally different than what Sandy gets, or Leah, or Allison, or whatnot. And that's kind of the fun of letting the students lead.
I get that, and I appreciate the fact that you're stating that, all four of you, perhaps. It's just that, how it is that when you introduce something, and I don't want to give a kid's mindset that they're focused on, okay, this is a book about whatever, and then all of a sudden they're looking for it and they look at you and goes, that's not what the book's about. It's completely different. But again, it lends to the statement, what did you think the book was about? Which is good, but that's why I wanted to know where those themes were coming from. Thank you.
And I would say if you, like when I had a project where students, I said, just bring in a book, and they had to sign up so we didn't have people repeating books. Some of the books I signed up for, I thought, really, that's a leadership book? And then when they brought it in and explained it, I was like, I saw it in a whole new light.
And I did the same thing where I had them bring in a children's book, and I modeled it with a few of mine. And when I saw the titles that they were signed up for, I was like, and I would Google it and figure out what it was. And I'm like, this is so far off base. Like, I don't know what they're going to do and tie it in. and it's amazing what kids will come up with, especially, and it was books that I'd never heard of before. So it was great that kids were bringing these in, and there was that accountability to it. And sometimes it was like, sometimes I put the, for me, I put the, I guess, theme in there, because that for me knows when I'm going to bring it into class, and knows it helps me kind of schedule when I'm going to bring things in a little bit. And maybe that partially skews kids to what they think the topic is going to be, but the conversation is what really, drives it with the kids.
For my leadership classes, what I normally do is each month I have kind of a different theme. And so like we were talking about, building relationships is earlier in the school year, so they're a little bit safer, whatnot. But early on, it's like imagination and potential, and then I start looking at books like a Who Moved My Cheese, when seniors are getting into the colleges and life is going to go askew, or when we need it, or mental health, when the kids are really struggling with keeping the wheels on the wagon, so to speak. So sometimes I will recognize that this month or these couple weeks, they need to really focus in on these topics. And yes, the conversation may be a little bit different, but I'm providing them a book that I think they need to hear.
Well, yeah, and I can say that, things have happened in class, or something happens on campus, and I think, oh my gosh, let's read this book. And just like when Leah was describing the dot, which I've used for years, I was like, oh, that's a different way of looking at the dot. I bring it in, and then the kids, they read it and discuss it, and oftentimes they'll take it on a tangent that is really better than what I had come up with and what I thought. I've been known to go into Barnes & Noble pre-COVID, obviously, and just sit and look through books. That's how I found What Do You Do with an Idea? And then I was so excited when What Do You Do with a Problem? What Do You Do with a Chance came out. But lately what I've been doing is formats like this with peers, is discussing what kinds of books they're using to tackle really difficult topics by springboarding off of a simple children's book. And I think another thing, Jose, is putting to parents that these are books that are intended for first, second, third, up to fifth grade probably books, that kind of lowers their anxiety level. Although so far I haven't had a book questioned, so I'm knocking on some wood here. But the kids leading those discussions, I think, really empowers them and really helps them to solidify how they feel about certain topics and certain issues, because they can hear their peers talking about it and they can really think about something. And it just helps.
What I have found, as I've taught student leaders for a long time, is whenever there's a YouTube video, TED Talk, movie clip, book, whatever it is, the question I always ask afterwards is, what did this mean to you? I never give you things frivolously. There's always a purpose. Why did I share this with you? What leadership lesson does it hold? And so I love seeing all these examples of all these amazing books.
Hey, Ron, one more thing that Shannon and I were talking about, I think it was before we came on, is that some of these books actually are available on YouTube, read by the author or read by a teacher, so that they can see the pages. So if you're interested in some of these, you might want to look them up on YouTube. That's what I did with because Shannon had said that that was available, and I thought, oh, I'm going to check it out. And I Am Peace, a book of mindfulness. I was particularly looking for something for mindfulness, so I thought, I'm going to look. And there is a recording of the author reading it. So, you know, while we're virtually teaching, that might be a good way to do it as well.
Yeah.
And
I was gonna say, yeah, sometimes it's been hard if you're going like, and look at this, you know, and it's a little awkward. So that's a great option. I also think it's something to think about, because sometimes teachers say, I just can't pull it off. I'm just not that kindergarten kind of a teacher. And so having another person read it, like Allison had mentioned, having her own leadership students read it, having the author possibly read it, and sometimes they even have little kids reading it online. I think that's kind of fun too. So seeing it in a different way, I think, is a great opportunity. Just like, cannot stress enough, children's books are a great asset.
I just threw in the chat. So when Libby, who's now 13 years old, when she was growing up, we would watch Storyline Online on YouTube, and it's members of the Screen Actors Guild. They read children's books. When you mentioned, Leah, when you mentioned Rex, that reminded me of Clark the Shark, which was read by Chris Pine. So these different, you know, celebrities, actors, and they do such a great job doing all the voices and everything. So that's another great resource that I threw into the chat. All right, well, Allison, I think, are we ready to, just about ready to wrap this up and kind of do our conclusion now?
We are. Am I muted? No.
Well, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so thank you everybody for being here tonight. I know it's the middle of summer vacation, even though maybe summer vacation moved you from the dining room to the living room or the backyard. So, but we really appreciate you being here and sharing your ideas and questions with us this evening. Next week, we are actually going to tackle a topic that I think is really important to a lot of our members. I know it's very important to me personally. It's addressing social emotional learning and mental health. And so we will have our speaker friends, Tyler Derman, Happiness is Now, and #ICanHelp, who will be informal on that panel. There is a email blast going out with a link tomorrow, but you could sign up tonight at www.cada1.org/corona. What was the other thing I was going to say about it? Could sign up tonight, and oh, I don't know, my brain is, I'm exhausted. But I know, if you have any questions ahead of time, please feel free to email those to me so that Ron and I and Jeff can have those and put those out. It's going to be in formal format like we have done with the other speakers, where we will have them just kind of tag team off of each other. It's not going to be an organized, you know, like this person speaks, and show slides like we did tonight. It'll be more informal, where we throw a question out there and then the panelists take turns answering the questions as they see. And also, Ron is showing you right now the Corona page. There are a ton of Zooms that we have already held on a variety of topics: distance learning, social media, trainings, orientations, and retreats, honoring the class of 2020. I'm going to take some of the ideas for honoring the class of 2020 and hopefully provide an experience where kids do a drive-through welcome to school. So all of those are recorded. The slideshows are on there as well. On some of them, the chats are there as well. And so you can go into those and look at what's available and get any notes or see anything that you have missed. After Labor Day, all of this is going to go behind the membership wall. We're trying to give people time to renew their membership, because we know it's been an unusual spring, and being able to connect with your student council and your bookkeepers and all those things. But this isn't just for the summer. We are planning to continue these into next year. And our next president knows how to do these really well. So I have a feeling he might continue this into the future, because it's a great format. And for me, it's as much work as it is to put it together. I feel like I get so much out of it, where some of my peers kind of disconnected at the end of school and are now like, wait, what? I have to do what? I've kind of warmed up to the idea and gotten tons of great ideas from my peers, from our speakers, our sponsors. And I feel like I'm ready. I'm excited. I feel like I'm a first-year teacher and I'm ready to go because I'm so charged up with all these new ideas and new ways of doing things. I just see the opportunities instead of the obstacles at this point.
All right. So, hey, on behalf of, let's go ahead and just give our panelists one more round of applause, or, sign language round of applause. And thank you so much for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing you on Monday, July 27th for our next CADA Zoom event. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.